Design చాలా ఉండే.
He's feeling every design. I can see that.
చెప్పండి యాక్సెంట్ బీపీ
Yesterday you were sitting there, I was sitting there, I was like, what are you doing?
Hare Krishna.
Any sleep problem? Long days.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna Krishna.
Krishna Krishna.
Hare Hare.
Hare Hare.
Hare Ram.
Hare Ram.
Hare Ram.
Hare Ram.
Ram Ram.
Ram Ram.
Hare
Hare
Hare.
Hare.
So welcome to the 8th day of the 9-day series of Mahabharat. And today we'll be discussing about Duryodhana. And because of Duryodhana, the audience is less. Not very enthusiastic to hear about Duryodhana, but this is not about Duryodhana. This is about how we should not become a Duryodhana. So, thank you. So let us welcome Prabhuji with 3 loud and enthusiastic.
Haribo! 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 Om Jnana
ज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकाय चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Dear Lord, please guide us all so that we can, by looking at the dark characters in the epics, detect and correct the darkness that is there in our own hearts. Hare Krishna. So, in Western philosophy, there's a term which comes up very frequently, which is not that common generally in the Indian tradition.
Sorry.
So, and that term is human nature. We talk about the soul's nature or our essential nature. Now, in the Western tradition, because of there is no, while there is an understanding, at least in Christianity, that there is a soul, but they don't really typically separate the soul from the body. And because of that, the idea is that the soul and the body are more or less, the soul is different, but still is not different. And that's why in the Christian tradition, it's going to disconnect with it. So they have the concept of resurrection. Now resurrection is very different from the Vedic concept of reincarnation. What is the difference? Resurrection?
Coming back to life.
Yeah, alive from the dead, but in this context, in the same body. Like sometimes medically you resurrect someone, that is resuscitation. Also, we have this defibrillators. If somebody has got a heart attack, revive them. So, but resurrection is basically like Christ is said to have resurrected. And the idea is the person comes back in the same body, looking exactly the same. And that is one of the reasons why in that tradition burial is emphasized. That eventually everybody will be revived in the same body. So of course that leads to some serious logical problems. That say, if somebody dies when there is a 6-month baby, then will there be a 6-month baby throughout the eternity? Isn't it? But they never had a young body. If somebody dies when they are 85 years old, will they have an 85-year-old body throughout for rest of eternity in heaven? It won't be heavenly for them, isn't it? So the idea of resurrection has its logical problems. And this is one reason why the Catholic Church is so much against divorce. Because they have not an earthly problem with it, a heavenly problem with it. What is the heavenly problem? That say if a couple separates and they are Catholic Christians and they remarry with someone else. And in heaven, who will the couple be with? With the ex or the next one? So they have that problem with somebody who becomes a widower also. But there they can't stop really, widower. Now the point is, in the Western tradition, there is this idea of human nature because they consider the human nature to be the essence of a person. So they have this idea that there are different kinds of souls, because without soul there is no life, but there are different kinds of souls, and only humans have the kind of soul that has the potential for eternal life, and therefore they talk about human nature. Now that particular term is not used specifically because humanity is just one stage in our spiritual journey. So we shouldn't over identify with our humanity. Of course, humanity is important because that's where we are right now. But the question essentially is that when they say human nature, is human nature basically good or basically bad? So we could avoid the term human nature, we just use the word people. So are people innately good, or are people innately bad? So what do you think is the answer according to our tradition? Are people innately good or innately bad?
Innately good.
Innately good.
Good and bad actually. Modes keep changing.
Soul.
Mode keep changing.
Soul is good.
Okay, the soul is good.
Based on the concept of soul, it is innately good. But because of this material body, there might be both.
Okay, that's a good answer. So basically, the idea is it depends on how you define innately. That there are basically two schools of thought. There is the political left and there is the political right. Now, the political right generally holds the idea that there is something problematic about people, and unless there is disciplining, unless there is discipline, people's lower nature will come up and they will do bad things. And so the right is about discipline and rules and enforcement of rules, whereas the left, so the right is basically that not that people are innately bad, but there is something bad in people, and it's very important to emphasize that individuals have a potential to be bad, and it is the responsibility of society to make them good. Now the left is exactly opposite. The left's idea is that individuals are essentially good, but it's social injustice and social inequality and social systems that make people bad. And that's why there is a lot of emphasis on social justice nowadays. So the idea is that society makes people good. Society means, say, parents' upbringing. Society makes people good. The social culture, the way the upbringing is there, that's what makes people good. But in the left, the idea is society is actually what makes people bad. So this is where a lot of people may talk about, my upbringing was so bad, and I had parental neglect, and I had parental trauma, and I lived in a very bad neighborhood, and this happened and that happened. Now there could be truth to both. It's not that it's one or the other. But the increasing tendency nowadays is to put the blame on the society. Say, like if some people become terrorists, and they say that, oh, actually, those people are not bad, but then terrible socio-economic conditions, there are no growth prospects for them, and that's why they become terrorists. That's why they become criminals. So quite often, even in movies, there is this attempt to have like an origin story for a villain. Now, why did the villain become a villain? So sometimes it's when we are hearing any story, it is natural to identify with those who are the good characters, the heroes, so that can inspire us to also become good. But to some extent, it is good to also study the bad characters and to understand why they became bad or how they became bad. So it's one thing that when we say, oh, this person is a monster, this person is a demon, this person is a sociopath, like that, when we use those words, we can use those words as describers sometimes. But the point is, it's as if to think that there is nothing similar between me and this person. It's almost as if this person belongs to a different species. And the word is otherify. Now, Otherify means make that person as belonging to some other group only. Like this person is not a human being only. So by otherifying someone, we say that okay, this person is something which I am not at all. And therefore, when that person does something terrible, it's just that person's problem. It has got nothing to do with, has got nothing to do with the broader community, the broader culture, the broader value system. It's completely different from me. So, for example, in modern Western history, Nazism is considered to be one of the biggest brutalities in history. So now, of course, there have been many killings that have happened. There have been mass killings, there's been genocide, there's been ethnic cleansing. But what was unique about the Second World War and the Holocaust was that it was the first time that industrial efficiency was brought to mass slaughter. And the gas chambers was a particularly diabolical idea. So then, it is still now, historians are deliberating what exactly happened. It is that, is it like for one generation, all of Germany flipped out? And it is like even ordinary people acted in horrendous ways. Some of them became instruments for the state and they actively perpetrated the killing of the Jews. Others consented or facilitated. So, what exactly happened? And one thing about Germany is that, before Hitler took power, Germany was considered to be one of the most advanced scientific states. And after that also, it's like through the Second World War and the bombing and everything, after that, that Nazism is completely condemned. And even modern Germany doesn't want to identify with that. They have preserved the memories of what has happened, but they don't identify with that at all. So, at least at an official level. So, the point is, in human history, there are sometimes chapters of brutality. And what happens? So, why do people do something like this? So psychologists, or sociologists, historians, they try to study to understand this. And one of the things is, so we will be talking about Duryodhan. Today I'll be focusing more on Dushasan. Because I want to focus on a particular theme before we go to Duryodhan, which we'll be talking tomorrow. So we're going to talk like, how bad people make other people bad. And in Western history, there's a lot of relativism nowadays. Relativism means that, okay, you eat meat. You don't want to eat meat, or you don't eat meat. I want to eat meat, let me eat meat. Like a practical level, there's you do what you want to do. You feel that a male-female relationship should be only after marriage. I don't feel that way. It's I will live my life, you will live your life. There's a lot of moral relativism nowadays. But how far does relativism go? If somebody says that, okay, nowadays people say, I have my sexual preferences. Some people want to have sex with the same gender, whatever. So if somebody says, I like to have sex with children, can that be accepted in the name of relativism? But there have to be, when we go towards relativism, there have to be some boundaries. So even in liberal Western culture, for example, consent or a particular age of consent, these are boundaries. So we cannot have complete relativism. So there was a move towards total relativism, but then the Nuremberg trials were the trials when after the Second World War, the German officials were held on trial. And that was the time when all these German officers and soldiers, they said we were simply following orders. We had the basic training in military is to follow orders, follow the instructions of the authorities. And that's what we were doing. And our authorities told us to kill, we killed. They told us to send people to gas chambers, we did. So we cannot be held responsible because we were following the discipline of the military discipline, the military standard of obeying our authorities. So the Nuremberg trials decided that this is not an acceptable excuse. Although in military you are expected to follow orders, but we all have are meant to have an inner human compass. And that human compass, that our basic conscience, our conscience can go wrong. But killing innocent children, brutalizing women, just burning people by just ordinary civilians. Now, if your authorities give you an order to do that, then it is your responsibility to disobey it. And even if you have grown up with a particular value system of obeying your authorities, there is a limit to that. So when we are obeying someone, how far do we go in obeying someone? Now that's why when Prabhupada went to America in 1965, there was a huge cult scare. And initially our movement is also programmed for the many incidents that happened. Like the Nuremberg trials happened in 1940, around 1950s kind of thing. But after that, there are some cults which came up. There was one Reverend Jones in Jonestown he had in America, and he claimed that I am God. And then he was doing a lot of unethical things, a lot of criminal things. And one US senator went to investigate, and they killed him over there. And they had a lot of brutal practices. But then what happened was that finally, when it became clear that he's not going to escape, the US government came in force over there. So he told everyone, this is the test of your faith. This is the time, just like Jesus was crucified. This is the time that I am also going to be crucified. I am also going to be killed. But if you choose to have faith in me right now, you will all be delivered. And what happened was, at that time, under his instruction, parents gave poison to their children. And then the leader took poison himself, and the whole Jonestown, everybody took poison. And when the government came there, it was just a whole pile of corpses over there. And now, so from that point onward, the idea of blind obedience to any authority, that the American mind became very suspicious of it. The Western mind in general, in the West, in general, whenever we talk about authority, there is distrust of authority. You may have noticed this in work culture also. Indian culture is much more hierarchical. The Western culture is much more egalitarian. So there are many reasons for the distrust of authority, but there have been horrendous abuses of authority. And those abuses of authority have become imprinted in the Western collective memory. Even if the specific incidents may not be there. So the thing is that are people, I started with the question of, are people innately bad, or do some factors make them bad? And if the factors make them bad, then how much are they responsible for that? Are they responsible, like say, if somebody has a bad authority and that authority tells them to do terrible things, then should we do that or should we not do that? That's an important question. Is that, so continuing that theme, what happened was, so in our movement, so this whole fear of authority was there. And when in our movement we had people leaving their parents, leaving their families, and living a completely cloistered lifestyle, where people are completely disconnected from the world, then that raised to suspicion that we are also like a cult. And many things, there are 6-7 typical characteristics of a cult, and unfortunately our movements seem to match all of them. One of them is disconnect from all previous relationships. Second is don't read any other information sources. Never question your authority. So these are typical signs of a cult. So we faced a lot of challenges. Fortunately, at that time, unfortunately, there were also Prabhupada, some of the disciples of Prabhupada were also a bit over-ambitious, and especially after Srila Prabhupada departed, in order to expand the Krishna consciousness movement, they started doing certain things which were of highly questionable morality and legality. And so, for example, we had one long, huge property somewhere, and through that property, there we wanted to build a big structure. And that property also was a path by which drug dealers could go. So the drug dealers talked with the community leader and they said, we will give you, because it was our property and we were considered a religious cult, so we had a religious group, so we had our protection. So the drug dealers talked with the religious leader or that community, and the drug dealers were given a safe passageway to go from there. And the drug dealers gave some portion of their money so that we could build our temple. And now this is a horrendous thing to do. And why we're talking about it, it's very easy to condemn, condemn cult behavior when we see it outside. And there was when this Islamic states had started, so a lot of people from Europe also joined. Some from America, but a good number of people from Europe. Those who were born whites, they joined the Islamic states at that time. So afterwards, some of them were de-radicalized. And then there are interviews given. So I have a friend who has done his PhD in radicalization. It's a very serious social phenomena. Like, how do ordinary people seemingly become so deadened, they become radicalized and they become terrorists? So one of the things that came up consistently among many factors is like there was this European British boy. He said that life is so complex. The reason I joined Islamic States was that Islam offered simple answers to life's complex questions. The big advantage of joining Islam was I don't have to think anymore. If my religious lawyer tells me do this, do this. If I don't do this, don't do this. That's all. Now, this can seem very disturbingly similar to what I have heard some devotees. Krishna consciousness makes life so simple. Yeah, it does make life simple. Sometimes. Isn't it? The world is still a complex place. And we are not meant to outsource our decision making to some other authority. We have to fly our own plane. So the point is that if we look at our tradition, the way you look at Prabhupada taught a lot of philosophy. Prabhupada condemned blind obedience. But the thing is that sometimes in Bhishma's teachings to Mahabharat, it's a very important principle. He says that it's very easy to make rules to prevent bad behavior. That if this is wrong, I will punish anyone who does this. But he says over there that don't just think what good a rule can do when it is applied. Think also what harm the rule can do when it is misapplied. That don't assume that the person who has the authority to implement the rule will always be a good person. Bhishma is speaking from his own realizations. That he took a vow to commit himself to the ruler of Hastinapur. And he could not have contemplated that such a deadly combination of a passive king and a malicious prince would come together. So in general, the overall tenor, the overall mood of Bhishma's teachings to Yudhishthira is that it is not that the purpose of administration is to make the king powerful. The purpose of administration is to make the individual powerful. Powerful in the sense that the individual can make sound decisions, not that the individual becomes power hungry. So, why are we discussing this over here? That we will talk about Dushasan today. So, Dushasan was the number 2. He was under Duryodhana. And so, how did Duryodhana's influence come upon him? And how much is he guilty or not guilty for this, for what he did? And then tomorrow we'll talk about Duryodhana. So basically, the theme here is that Duryodhana was a person who did seem to have evil tendencies. And if you look at Dushasan's character, it's like this is Duryodhana's. Okay, let's put it this way. This is Duryodhana's trajectory. Duryodhana is going downwards. And then if you look at Dushasan's trajectory, there are times when Dushasan actually moves away from Duryodhana. But then again, he comes back to be with Duryodhana. So, from what is understood in the Mahabharat, Dushasan was like the trusted right-hand person of Duryodhana. And right from the beginning, whatever be the reason, in traditional culture, obeying your elders is considered to be a standard thing. So there is
Today only, tomorrow no class, returning tomorrow.
It is it.
tomorrow no class, last class is there. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So the thing is that there's one caricature, but it is a telling caricature. That it is that Dushasan followed Duryodhan the way Lakshman followed Ram. But the problem was that Duryodhan was not Ram. So Dushasan always faithfully, so he was right in the scheme when Bhima was poisoned. And then Dushasan, sometimes there are bad guys, and the bad guys have their enforcers. Enforcers mean construction, that person is also like a gangster, but they're agents who enforce, those who kill or those who terrorize, those who intimidate. So when Duryodhan made the plan to dishonor Draupadi, whom did he ask to go and get Draupadi? Dushasan. And Dushasan exhibits no hesitation, no fear. He goes gleefully. He just barges into the women's chamber over there. And at that time, what happens is that Draupadi is alone. Normally, in the chamber, everybody would be together. But Draupadi has just had her period, and that's just ending. And she had just bathed, she was just wearing a single cloth because of that. And that's why at that particular time, either Kunti or Gandhari were there. When Dushasan went in and dragged her out. He said, I cannot come in this condition. Dushasan said that you are our slave now. We can do whatever you want. And then he dragged her by her hair and brought her and hurled her into the room. Now, every single action that he did over there was a horrendous thing. Then, now he trying to disrobe her. It was, there are good people who do good things, there are bad people who do bad things. But there are especially bad people who feel good while doing bad things. Isn't it? That sometimes we have to do bad things because there's just no option. And there is some part of us which even bad people, they have their boundaries. That somebody may say, okay, like even in many of our devotees do jail preaching. So we have some jail officials who also become devotees. So they say that if somebody is like a child sex abuser, that person will be very unsafe even in jail. Because even prisoners, they don't like somebody who has abused children. And that's why if somebody is a child sex offender, they often have to put them in solitary confinement. Because that person will very easily be killed inside the jail. So they will say everybody in that jail is a criminal. But even criminals have certain sense of boundaries. This is not to be done. So for Dushasan to take joy in what he was doing, that is just shows such perversity. And then after that, that's the time when Bhima takes a vow. He said that Bhima takes two vows at that time. He said that with the hands that you dragged Draupadi, with the hand pulled her hair, with the hand that you tried to disrobe her. He said, I will cut off your hand. And he said, I will drink your blood and I will kill you. Now Dushasan is having fun at the expense of the Pandavas and Draupadi. But when he hears that, he will visibly trembles for a moment. But then nobody's taking him seriously. Bhima also takes a vow at that time that I will break Duryodhana's thigh, and then I will kill him. So when the incidents move forward, so we could say in this particular incident, in one sense, he does something worse than what Duryodhana is doing. Because Dushasana, this is in his dealing with Draupadi in the disrobing incident. So somebody else might tell him to do it, but it is he who is doing it. Like a boss may tell you go and shoot this child in the head. Now the boss who tells is a terrible thing, but somebody who actually goes and kills the child. That's a horrible thing to do. So in many ways, what he does over here is worse. But when Krishna's peace mission is there, at that time, Krishna initially speaks to Dhritarashtra. When Krishna comes as the Shanti Dut, he speaks to Dhritarashtra. And Dhritarashtra, within a few minutes, says, Krishna, everything that you say makes sense to me. I want peace. But my son doesn't listen to me. So please persuade him. So this is the first public admission. It's like something like an open secret. Everybody knows it. Like say in India, the previous government there was one person in the chair, another person was in power. So like that, everybody knew that Duryodhana had the real power. But it was never admitted like that. Now here Dhritarashtra openly says, that Duryodhana doesn't listen to me. Then Krishna turns and starts speaking to Duryodhana. And what Krishna speaks over there is also amazing. You can have a whole session in conflict resolution, mediation, based on that itself. And of course, ultimately, even our best efforts won't work. So, but Krishna uses Sam, Dam, Hed, and Danda. So, he starts with Sam. Sam is what? We share our interests. We have shared interests. Like say, India and China may maybe having border issues, we may have conflicts. But nowadays, there is a small concept of the global south. That the global south is that there is the West, and then there's the global south. So India and China are both parts of the economy that are ascending. So we have shared interests. So he says that ultimately, all of you are relatives. You belong to the same dynasty. And the world is filled with kings who are threats. But if you two come together, then no one will be able to destroy you. Not only family ties, but also prudence. Prudence means intelligence. It suggests that you settle the issue, you patch things up. So that's the use of Sam. He elaborates on this. Then there is the Sam, Dam, Danda, and Hed. So basically, it's like two people are there. Let's try to understand these four strategies. Two people are there and they are having a conflict with each other. They are fighting against each other. So when conflict is to be resolved, broadly say one way is that we have shared interests. Let's focus on our shared interests. That is the strategy of Sam. So what we have in common is much more than what we have in difference. And that's why it's really not worth fighting. So this is what Prabhupada will also say, your love for me will be shown by how you cooperate. You all may have your individual inspiration, you may all have individual nature, but we are all trying to serve Krishna. We are trying to serve Krishna under the guidance of Srila Prabhupada. So shared interest, that is Sam. Then Dam is where one person says, I will give you a lot. So Dam is where it's more like concessions. I don't want peace. I don't want conflict. So I will accommodate you more and more. So Dam can also refer to allurement. But it's not so much allurement, it's more like concession. So not exactly negotiation. Dam is, it's okay, I want peace. So I will settle for less than what is fair because I want to avoid the conflict. Ideally, you should settle for what is fair, but Dam is where I am ready to bend slightly backwards. This is where Krishna says, that just give the Pandavas 5 villages. This is the Pandavas actually had a flourishing kingdom. And from there to go down to 5 villages is a very, very big go down, big step down. But Krishna is ready to go to that extent also. And again, it's interesting over here that although the 5 Pandavas are often said to be like 5 fingers, they're all united together. But Krishna does not ask for one village for the 5 Pandavas. He asks for 5 villages. You know why? They are Kshatriyas. Everybody needs their space. So each one of them will need their space, their kshetra over which they can act. Generally, as people grow older, it's just natural that they need their space. So anyway, that is a danda. Now, danda it is more of the show of power. Danda it's show of power. Where Krishna tells that it is using a stick means he says that that you think that you will be able to win, but there is absolutely no chance that you can win. Because Bhima has killed deadly demons whom nobody could kill. And Bhima has taken a vow to kill you, and he is not going to spare you. And you have so much confidence in Karna, but he has never defeated Arjuna. Arjuna will defeat him. Arjuna has defeated the entire army of the gods, and that too at the very start of his career as an archer at Khandav. Then he has defeated demons whom Indra could not defeat. When Arjuna had gone to the heavens, Indra had asked him to go and kill the demons called Nivet Kavachas. So Arjuna has performed immense austerities and acquired an unmatchable array of celestial weapons. And Krishna goes on and speaks about the power of the Pandavas and what they have done. And then after that, the final one is Bhed. Bhed means on the opposite side, what you do is you focus. If this person is just non-accommodating, is unreasonable, is inflexible, then try to focus on those who are more reasonable, who are likely to be more flexible. So this is where Krishna unleashes his master stroke. Now, see, when we are speaking also, we are noticing, if you are giving a talk, who is interested, how much interested they are, who are listening. And even when somebody is listening, how much is the person getting persuaded by the listening? How much is that person not getting persuaded? So this Krishna is observing, and Krishna says, like if somebody hearing and the person folds the hand and looks backward, shifts backward. They're becoming more and more defensive or more aggressive. They are not really accepting this. So he sees that Duryodhana on one side is becoming more and more inflexible. But he sees Dushasan is weakening. Now, when especially Krishna speaks about the promise of Bhima and what Bhima has vowed to do to Duryodhana and to Dushasan, Dushasan again feels chill go through his body. And when Krishna completes his speech, that time Dushasan bursts out. He said, we should all listen to Keshav and we should settle for peace. And then finally, the Duryodhana glares at him. This is the one time when Dushasan seems to have a spine. And then he turns to Dhritarashtra and he says, and if Duryodhana does not listen to us, then we should arrest Duryodhana and hand him over to Keshav. When this happens, Duryodhana, what's happening over here? How dare he go against me? And then Duryodhana just walks out. Now for all the other 98 Kauravas, this has never happened. There has been never dissension at the top. It's like number 1 and number 2, they're going always together. Now they don't know what to do, whom to follow. But they think, in most of the Dhritarashtra's interactions, it is Dhritarashtra is always being affectionate to Duryodhana. So they think that if I had to choose between the two of them, Duryodhana clearly has more power, and Duryodhana is the main person who has come up with all the schemes. So one by one, they all walk out. Now Dushasana is left all alone. And now he's looking at the door where everybody's walked out, and looking at Duryodhana, he's looking at he's looking at the assembly, everyone, and he's undecided. And there's that one moment, there's few moments when he's wavering. So everybody who is following a bad authority, if somebody is following a bad authority, there is a moment in their life when their own conscience wakes up. Sometime or the other it happens with everyone. But that is the time when do they listen to their conscience? It is that if somebody is told to do something horrible. Now, like yesterday we discussed that sometimes to function in the world, we may have to do certain things. We cannot just be idealistic. Certain adjustments need to be done. But how far do we go in that? Is there a limit to that? So there are some times when the conscience does awaken. Now, when the conscience awakens, at that time, what do we do? So, Dushasana has that moment. But he says, okay, everybody has gone. I'm all alone over here. He also walks. And now, Duryodhana is also expert. Duryodhana is angry with Dushasana, but he doesn't want to lose Dushasana also. So they have gone to a nearby room and they're talking. And then Duryodhana hears Dushasana's footsteps coming in. And Duryodhana is so cunning. And now Dushasana is thinking, should I enter the room? Still now he's torn. Should I go back there? Should I come over here? And at that time, Duryodhana is speaking to his brothers. He says, this Keshava is a very dangerous person. He can speak in such a way that he can bewilder everyone. We have to be very careful with him. Anybody can be fooled by his words. That's what happened to our dear Dushasana, isn't it? And Dushasana is poking his head in. Yeah, that's what happened to me. And the modern term for this is gaslighting. What happens is that gaslighting is where one person is doing something wrong and the other person is trying to do something right, but he's distort the whole picture in such a way that you make that person only guilty for having done something wrong. Like somebody is an alcoholic and they have a spouse or a sibling or somebody who's trying to stop their alcoholism. And then they come, you cannot be doing like this. They come all angry. And this alcoholic is so cunning. He says, if you had not been such a terrible person, I would not have had to drink. And instead of this person thinking, I have to give alcoholism, the other person thinking, okay, I have to become a better person. And that person continues their alcoholism. So, Duryodhana, basically, he gaslights Dushasana. Now, Dushasana is not necessarily, we're not saying he is a good person. He also went along throughout. And he could say he was a brother. So there was a familial bond also. But the thing is that he had that chance. He had that chance to come out. But so actually following any authority is meant to strengthen our conscience, not silence our conscience. That the following authority is very important because what happens is right now our conscience, our inner voice, whether it is the voice of our Vivek Buddhi or the voice of our Mana, we don't really know that right. Now, the conscience, what is it meant to do is, when we follow an authority, what it is meant to do is, authority is meant to, with respect to our conscience, that by following the authority, our sense of right and wrong becomes clearer. Our conscience is meant to be strengthened. Meant to be strengthening our conscience, not silencing our conscience. So if you see in the Bhagavad Gita also, it is Krishna tells us, Sarvadharman Pratyajamanekam Sharanam Vraja. But it is not that after that Krishna is micro-controlling Arjuna. It is not that before every arrow that Arjuna shoots, Arjuna has to consult Krishna. Should I shoot this arrow? Should I shoot this arrow? No, Arjuna is an individual in his own right. And he's making decisions. And sometimes Krishna insists that you act in this way, but many times Krishna goes along with Arjuna. So Krishna has not given us our individuality and our intelligence so that we can give it up. No, He's given us our individuality and intelligence so that we can develop it. So that we can purify it and use it in a healthy way. And Dushasan has that moment of awakening. But unfortunately, he does not take that moment of awakening. And when he accepts Duryodhan, he's also coming over here. He says, it is not that you betrayed me, it was Keshava. Keshava is a very deceptive person. Keshava is a very tricky speaker. So then Dushasan's fate is sealed at that time. Now, in the subsequent war, Dushasan is one of the key fighters on the Kaurava side. Although he's not as good as Duryodhan, but he's also a formidable warrior. And as a formidable warrior, what happens is that there are many occasions when Dushasan shows his prowess. And Dushasan is tasked with stopping Shikhandi from reaching Bhishma. And he actually, the whole Kaurava, Pandava, many Pandava forces try to help Shikhandi get past Dushasan. They don't succeed. It's only when Arjuna comes, and Arjuna is the person who is able to force Dushasan to fall back. And then, by the 17th day, the first half of the 17th day, Bhima has killed 98 of the Kaurava brothers. So only Dushasan and Duryodhan are remaining. So then, now when Dushasan does feel some fear, now like one by one, like somebody will have like a kill list, and they have a kill list, and then everybody has been on that tick it off. So I have a hit list. Okay, hit list or kill list, yeah. So I have a friend, a devotee friend in Israel. So they say in Israel, there are big streets. All the Hamas leaders that are there, the Hezbollah leaders that are there, they have like the big pictures and cross. So whoever has been killed, who has not been killed, they put that like that. Now, of course, they have to compromise because they want to get the refugees back. And many of those people who they arrested, they had to release. But the point is that now he knows that he is next on the hit list. So Dushasan fights, and on the 17th day, that is the time when Bhima, he knows that he's close to victory, and he is now going to succeed. So Bhima and Dushasan are fighting, and both of them are fighting with bow and arrow, and the fight just goes on. It seems to be indecisive. And then when a fight becomes too long and indecisive, Bhima becomes impatient. So Bhima just puts aside his bow and arrow, it's useless, and just jumps off his chariot. And he jumps with his mace. Now Bhima is huge, his mace is huge. And now Dushasan starts shooting arrows. And Bhima is just whirling his mace that the arrows just get flung everywhere. Now Dushasan is shooting arrows frantically, and some of the arrows hit Bhima. But Bhima is so now filled with the energy and the rage to get to Dushasan that Dushasan's arrows, even when they pierce Bhima, they seem to have no effect on him. And Dushasan is seeing Bhima charging towards him. He starts feeling his fear starts growing towards terror. And then he's thinking that still Bhima is some distance away, and he has to, see Bhima closing in, he's just thinking of jumping off his chariot. And Bhima notices it. That's what Dushasan is going to do. And Bhima just hurls his mace. That mace flies through the air and hits Dushasan on the body. And Dushasan flies off the chariot. What he wanted to do happens, but in a completely different way. He can't jump off the chariot, he's thrown off the chariot. And now when Bhima is angry, he starts roaring in anger. The description that, and sometimes you have to do mace fighting, it's enter into the Kaurava camp. And when you enter into the Kaurava camp, he would just be destroying everyone around him with his punches and with his mace. And sometimes, because he would be right in the enemy army, that his whole body would be covered with the blood of the enemies. His own blood also, because he would also get wounded, with the blood of the enemies also. So he would whole be like a nightmarish vision in red, with only his eyes and his teeth as white, as he's laughing and roaring. And just the sight of him would cause the Kauravas to just get alarmed and drop their weapons and run away. And then Dushasan is just flung on the ground. Both the impact of the fall and the impact of the blow. He tries to get up and run. Bhima just leaps through the air and bounces on him. It is pounding him. Now, this is one of the, because sometimes there's an action movie and there's a horror movie. So, there can be action also, which can be quite horrendous. So this is one scene in the Mahabharat, which is like you can have sexuality which is adult, and you can have violence which is also adult violence. So it is a bit like that. So then Bhima just pounds him and pounds him. And then finally, Bhima, when Dushasana is trying to fight back, but Bhima's rage and force is such that nobody can do anything. And Bhima is roaring in anger, and his roars are such that, seeing this, everyone is petrified. So at that time, when Karna is fighting, and Karna's mouth falls open in order. And Bhima is in such a rage that nobody dares to even intervene. If they intervene, if they try to attack him, Bhima's rage will turn toward them. And they just watching as this whole event is unfolding. And then Bhima raises his sword and cuts off the arm of Dushasana, the arm with which he had dragged Draupadi. And as Dushasana screams in horror. And as the arm is cut off, shoulder, the blood starts shooting out. And then as that blood comes out, Bhima picks the blood in his arms, his palms, and then he rises up and he looks around and he brings that blood to his mouth. And then he roars, he says, he brings that blood to his mouth, his whole face becomes bloodied. And then he says, "This is sweeter than my mother's milk. This is sweeter than the most delicious food that I have ever eaten." And seeing this, even Karna drops his bow. He says, "This is not a human being. This is a Rakshasa. What is this?" Seeing this happening, everybody starts running away. So later on, Gandhari hears this. And Gandhari, when the Pandavas go to meet the Gandhari and Dhritarashtra after the war is over, Gandhari asks Bhima, "How could you have drunk his blood?" So Bhima says that you should know that I brought the blood to my mouth, but my mouth was closed. So that blood does not go into his mouth. But Bhima is, what is he doing over here? See, in war, there are always mental games. And Bhima is using the tactic of intimidation over here. It's like, to scare someone. The enemy can do something like this. I don't even want to fight against them. So Bhima just wants to finish the war off. And then Bhima then takes his sword and then he cuts off the head of Dushasana. And Dushasana is already in immense pain. He becomes almost senseless. With a final scream, he passes away. He dies. And then Bhima turns out, his face and body are bloodied. And then he starts roaring. He's remembering how Draupadi had been dishonored and how this person was responsible. And then he roars, Duryodhan, you are next now. So now, here, this is how Dushasana meets his end. I'll make 2 points about Bhima, and then we'll end over here. If you have any questions, one or two we can take. So now, among the Pandavas, Bhima is, as I mentioned, he's the most Kshatriya kind of Pandava. He's like a Kshatriya squared. So Yudhishthira is more like the Brahmana kind of Kshatriya. So Yuddhe Chapya Apalayanam. Yuddhe Chapya Apalayanam is the character of Kshatriya. Now what that means is that not only that a person does not run away from the battlefield, but it's in general, if there's a confrontation, the person does not flinch from the confrontation. Okay, you want to fight? Let's fight. It could be a verbal fight, it could be a physical fight, it could be a martial fight, it could be a political fight, whatever it is. A person does not flinch from the fight. Now, is the cause worth fighting? That is something very important to consider. Now, I'll talk about 2 incidents which broadly nuance Bhima's character. So Bhima might seem to be like a very, almost like a bloodthirsty kind of person, but he's not like that. So Bhima is extremely powerful, and yet, see, among all the Pandavas, it is Bhima who Duryodhan finds most insecurity inducing for him. Because not only had been the eldest, but he, among the Kauravas, he had also been the strongest. Dushasana was like a close second to him, but whenever they would wrestle, they would do fighting, he would defeat all other Kauravas and he would inevitably defeat Dushasana also. But there was this one person, Bhima, he was no match to him. So when now Bhima used to enjoy exhibiting his strength. Now he was not malicious at any time, like Duryodhana. Malicious means wanting to hurt others. But he just had that sense of energy and exhilaration in exhibiting his energy. So when they had this Jalakrida, Jalotsav Jalakrida, so all the Kauravas and the Pandavas would go to a nearby river and they would play in the river. So Bhima would just pick up everyone and throw them into the water. And in many ways, it was just fun. But he did the same thing to Duryodhana. And Duryodhana found it humiliating. And just flung him away. So, and that happened in front of all his brothers. So, in the way the naak kat jati hai. So, Duryodhana felt like that. Now Bhima, it might seem that he was just showing off his prowess and he was insensitive. He did not sense what Duryodhana was going through. It's possible that maybe Bhima could have been a little more restrained in exhibiting his power. Like sometimes if we understand that somebody else might feel a little insecure when something is happening, when a particular thing is happening, then we might want to downplay our display of our opulence or our power. I remember at one place when in North America, at one place, there are multiple gurus who will do initiation together. So Raghunath Maharaj is also there. He's also going to give initiation. And 3 gurus. So there's the other 2 spiritual masters had about 15-20 disciples to initiate. And Maharaj had about 500 disciples to initiate. So then Maharaj said, at that place, I'll initiate only 20 disciples. I'll not initiate anyone. You can have a separate initiation later on. So the idea is that even the Ram, when Ram is telling Sita, you stay in the palace. You stay in the palace initially. Sita, I'll come with it. So Ram tells Sita, while you are in the palace, if you encounter Bharat, don't praise me in front of Bharat. Praise Bharat at that time. Because the idea is that although Bharat is virtuous, but still, we should not deliberately show our superiority in a way that makes the other person feel insecure or inferior. Now, of course, when the Pandavas, they had the Rasuya Yagya. At that time, others were bringing gifts. So now Duryodhan chosen any other, chose or accepted the service of. It is like, we'll talk about Duryodhan more. It is like, just like there are certain things which, if somebody is alcoholic, certain places or things trigger their alcoholism. So like that, there is we know if we have envy and certain things trigger our envy, then it is both our responsibility to not go into those situations, and if we sense that somebody else is envious of us, then we should not exhibit our opulence in front of them, which will trigger their envy. As much as possible. Sometimes for our service it may be required. But the thing is that, so we could say Bhima could have been a little more sensitive over there. But to his credit, it is not that Bhima was just ruthless and violent. That when Bhima came back after being saved from the poison, at that time he was told, there are different narratives about how he was told. One was that when he went underwater, when he got nectar, that time the Devatas over there told him that this was all arrangement of Duryodhana. The other narrative is that Yudsu is the half brother of the Kauravas, and Yudsu, he is the one person among the Kauravas who survives. He is the person who performed the last rites of the Kauravas. And just before the war begins, at that time, Yudhishthira calls out, is to the warriors on the opposite side. Says, all of you know that my cause is virtuous. If you want to come over to my side, you will have my shelter and protection. And when he calls that out, there's like one last call. So Yudsu from the Kaurava side comes over to the Pandava side. So the other narratives, like Mahabharat has different versions. So Yudsu tells him that I saw that it was Bhima who dragged you, and so it was Duryodhana who dragged you and put you into the ocean. So Bhima is enraged. He wants to teach Duryodhana a lesson. But he talks with Yudhishthira, and Yudhishthira, now either Yudhishthira tells him that at this point we have no evidence for this. So you were the victim, already everyone knows that there's a tension between you and Bhima, Duryodhana. So if you claim this, all that will happen is that we have split in the family. Most likely, Dhritarashtra will support Duryodhana. And then we will simply be suspected more. We may be accused of making a false accusation. We may be sentenced. We may be exiled. So either Yudhishthira says this, or the other narrative that Vidura tells him this. But either way, the point is, Bhima restrains himself. And similarly, when Krishna is going as the peace messenger, the final round of peace they try. So at that time, Bhima also says to Krishna, Krishna, you are expert at everything. Please try to settle for peace. Now Krishna cannot resist teasing Bhima over here. He said, Bhima, you have taken such vows of destroying the Kauravas. It is true indeed that even the greatest heroes lose their courage when the actual moment of war comes. Bhima gets angry, I am not losing my courage. But he said, a war will be brutal. The costs of the war will be devastating for everyone. That is why I am requesting you to settle peacefully. Now, Draupadi is not happy about this, but she also gives her consent. So it's not that Bhima is just indiscriminately angry and just wanting to kill everyone. So Bhima, he does feel now when he just destroyed the Shasan. One of the reasons also is that Bhima feels a sense of, he has taken that vow, of course, but Bhima also feels a personal sense of failure that Abhimanyu, he had promised Abhimanyu that we will go inside. We'll follow you inside and destroy from inside. And Dushasan had been one of the persons who had been among the 6 warriors who targeted Abhimanyu. It was Dushasan's son who had killed Abhimanyu. So all that pent-up rage comes in. But when Bhima kills Dushasan, that happens on the 17th day. And that's the time when Gandhari decides that I have to take things in my own hands. And she travels to from Hastinapur, she comes to Kurukshetra. So what happens over there? And Duryodhana's story we will discuss tomorrow. But the key point over here is that Dushasan meets his due ends. He's done what he has done is horrendous. He is a Atataina and he deserves to be killed. He's an aggressor. What he has done is brazen, naked aggression he has done. And he deserves to be killed. But now in his killing, there is no immorality. Like the other Kaurava warriors, when they kill, there is some question about morality. Here it is more a question of brutality. How could somebody do like this? But we might just clarify. And Krishna is there at that time, Krishna also not so. He acts as if he has drunk it. And that is, again, Bhima is trying to intimidate so that the war will end faster. And those who are still fighting, they lose their fighting spirit. So Dushasan's story is, it's like he is a person who is a villain, but again, if you consider on a spectrum, Dhritarashtra is completely passive. Dushasan is much more active. And Duryodhan is the most active. It's like, you can have a villain scale. So this is the passive villain. This is the most active villain. And now he's also active, but it is, would Dushasan himself have done any of the brutal things himself if Duryodhana had not been there? We don't know, maybe not. So Dushasan, is there anything that he does on his own? Is there any evil that he does on his own without Duryodhana telling him to do it? There is no instance of that also. So it's now the difference between Dushasan and Karna is that Dushasan is more bound by a family relationship. And in many ways, Dushasan and Duryodhana, the closer that comes to is Kumbhakarna and Ravana. So now Dushasan Duryodhana relation is somewhat similar. And the key difference over here is that Kumbhakarna, that when Hanuman has come and destroyed half of Lanka and devastated the morale of the Rakshasas also, it is an insult to them that one upstart monkey can come and devastate their defenses. So at that time, Kumbhakarna has his moment and he says that, oh Ravan, now you are consulting us now how to deal with this danger. Why did you not consult us before when you went and abducted Sita? You are saying that a king should act by consulting his advisors. Why did you not consult us at that time? Still, it is your fortune that you have a brother like me who will clean up your mess. He doesn't use those words, but he says that I will destroy Ram whenever he comes. Now, Ravan feels insulted by these words, smarting under the chastisement that is being given. But he needs Kumbhakarna and he just restrains the emotions and thanks Kumbhakarna for his support. So the psychological dynamics are slightly different over there. But the thing is, Dushasan is an example of a person who does bad things by blindly obeying a bad person. So in the Vedic tradition, as to just reinforce that point once again, that any guide that we have, like our intelligence is there and we have guides. So if I am here, we are never meant to outsource our intelligence to our guide. That means that you decide everything for me. Actually, our guide is meant to be a resource for our intelligence. That through whoever guide we have, they are meant to train us in our intelligence. Ultimately, whoever guide we have, that guide is not going to be there with us all the time. And even if that guide is very noble-hearted, even that guide is very selfless, but when we become dependent on that guide, what do you do when the guide is not there? Many times In America, at least, there is a whole program to try to integrate war veterans back into society. Because when they go into the war and army, they're all trained to follow orders. But when they retire from the army, now if there's no one to tell them what to do, they just don't know what to do. And they find it very, very difficult to live at that time. So every human being has a need for autonomy. And autonomy is a certain level, like the Pandavas, I said, that the Pandavas all followed Yudhishthira. But Krishna also recognized each of them needs their own village. So we all have a certain need for autonomy. The exact degree of autonomy may vary according to time, place, circumstance, according to culture, according to role, so many things like that. But the idea is that no authority should be used to either replace our conscience or our intelligence. Earlier, what I was talking about is conscience. Conscience is more of like an innate feeling, hey, this is something wrong. Maybe I should not be doing this. Intelligence is more based on reason. We reason, we analyze, and then we decide. But either way, our conscience and our intelligence both are resources for our decision making. And these resources are meant to be strengthened by our discipline, by the discipline that we follow. Discipline of, say, following a guide. Krishna says that tat vidhi pranipatena. What happens after that? The next verse is yad jnatva. Sorry, no. That whole verse is there, but what is the result of that? That's 434. 435. Yad jnatva na punarmoham evam yasasi pandava. By knowing this, you will not fall into illusion again. Yena bhutanya sheshani drakshasya atmanyato vayi. He's saying they are tattvadarshi and you will become tattvadarshi. It's not that they are the seers of the truth and by following them, you will become a seer of truth. Not that you will become eternally dependent on them for seeing the truth. So that is, there has to be not just a transmission of knowledge or a giving of instructions. There has to be a transmission of vision by which if the authority is able to see much more far-sighted, much more wisely, then we should also be able to see wisely. And that is the principle. Now, none of this is meant to minimize the principle of following authority. We all need to follow our authorities. We all need to, yasya prasadat bhagavad prasado. We all need guidance. Our intelligence, our conscience, right now is contaminated. But we have to know the purpose of following it. The purpose of following it is that ultimately we should also be able to think for ourselves. So there's a difference between education and indoctrination. So what Srila Prabhupada wanted was education. Education is about how to think. It is more about the process that we follow. Okay, how do we do reasoning based on scripture? Indoctrination is what to think. This is the answer and just accept this. Don't think anything more. So what Krishna does to Arjuna is, he is giving him guidance for education, not for indoctrination. So education also requires, of course, accepting authority. We have to hear from a teacher, we have to hear from a guide. But the purpose has to be clear. The purpose is that we should be able to think. Prabhupada wanted us to be independently thoughtful. So I'll summarize what we discussed today. Mainly 3 points. We have discussed Dushasan's story. And the point was discussing about blind obedience. That was the theme. So I started by discussing about are people innately good? Is everybody innately good or innately bad? So what we discussed was that, that I will discuss this more, but at the level of soul, everybody is good. At the level of the mind, we all have conditionings. And it's generally both. So how much does, if we are innately good, then it's like society. So it's like there's a question between individual and others is society. So is it individual good and individual is the individual is good and society makes him bad? Or is it the individual is bad and has to be made good by society? So that's the question. So we apply this dynamic to the influence of Duryodhana on Dushasana. So how much were Dushasana's decisions, actions, he's responsible, and how much is Duryodhana responsible. So we discussed how Duryodhana has his trajectory, and Dushasana's trajectory is he goes downwards, he comes up, but ultimately he meets the same end. So he has everybody who's following the bad authority. They may do sometimes terrible things. This was the disrobing incident. But then he had his moment of awakening as a peace mission. So he unfortunately did not take that. And talk also how Duryodhana gaslighted him. It's not that you were misled, it's actually Keshava was misleading. And then finally, we talk about Bhima's intimidation. Intimidation is like scare tactics. So in a war, sometimes to demoralize the opponents. At Bhima, we discussed that his killing of Dushasana is brutal. Dushasana's killing, that is brutal, although it's not actually as brutal as it seems. Not drink the blood. But we see the other side of his character also. He is a reasonable person. And that reasonability is seen in his, after he's poisoned, he agrees to stand down. Although he wants to get back at him. And also, before the peace mission, he also says that let's try to settle it peacefully. But ultimately, the Kauravas are not ready to listen, and that's why they have to be punished. And we discussed the key lesson for us is that whatever, if we are here and we have any guide, the purpose of the guide is to actually strengthen our conscience and to strengthen our intelligence. It is not that we outsource it to them. So in this way, we all, by taking guidance from worthy authorities, can become better. And if somehow something goes wrong and our authorities start, we come under questionable authorities, then we will have our intelligence and conscience ready to be able to make the right choice even in those situations. Thank you very much. Hare.
If one question can be taken. Prabhuji, Prabhuji, I have seen observation while you were speaking all this today with a little experience. I was able to relate to some things. The nature of a person when he comes to any institution to follow an authority, right? You see some people who say, "Oh, whatever Guru told is perfect. We are going to follow it. We'll do it. There is no deviation." They are very clear about it. But the same people, after some time, do extreme things against the Guru also. Because sometimes we see that the tendency of keeping Guru as a reason to do what they are doing is actually the nature of doing what they want to do. They show their independence as if they are dependent, but actually they exhibit their independence only. Right? I mean, isn't it right? Can you throw light on that?
Very true. Humility or submission. No, it can be, it is meant to actually be like a path to self-realization, path to Krishna ultimately. Amanitvam. That is the first characteristic of humility, of knowledge. Yeah, that's what it's meant to be. But many times it can be the password to power. How password to power? See, I am so submissive to my authority, therefore all of you should be that submissive to me. Now what happens is, in this situation quite often, that person's authority is not really trying to micro-control their life. That person's authority gives them a lot of autonomy. But then they don't give that autonomy to others. So I think this is very much a danger. And unfortunately what happens is, these declarations of, whatever the Guru says is right, but those are often seen as signs of great Guru Bhakti. And are they really signs of great Guru Bhakti? So what happens in general whenever we are telling on authority? Is one extreme is to idolize the authority. Idolizes that this authority is completely perfect. Now, sometimes those very same people go to the other extreme and demonize the authority. That demonize in many ways the rhythmic philosophy. It is whatever the reason for it, and many those who are following it are also dedicated in their own way. We're not criticizing them, but it's a reaction to this idea that the guru is completely perfect. And then there were phases when some of our spiritual leaders had issues. So then you go to the other side and Prabhupada is the only guru. And everybody who else claims to be a guru is actually a usurper, is actually unauthorized, and is actually taking the privilege that is meant only for Prabhupada. So it's almost like a demonizing the guru. So actually, in between, we could say, is to humanize. Now, what does humanize mean? Now, we may say that actually there is that verse where Guru Shunaramati. So think of the Guru as an ordinary human being. Is a hellish mentality. But as we carefully understand what it means, it is that Arche Vishnu Shulari, that we don't think of the deity to be stone. Now, the deity, is it stone? Of course it is stone. But it is much, much more than stone also. Isn't it? And just like, is a currency note paper? Of course it is paper. But it is so much more than paper that the fact that it is paper, it is almost completely overlooked except for certain functional purposes. That is, it can get torn, it's subject to something sharp, or it can get wet and spoiled or something like that. So otherwise, we don't treat it like paper at all. But still, it is subject to the damage that paper can go through. Similar deities are not stone. Say if we have wooden deity, and then if we exhibit, if subjected to water, if we do water abhishek, jala abhishek of a wooden deity, then after the abhishek we'll have to do painting again, isn't it? We cannot do that. So similarly, the guru is not a human being means that the guru is so devoted to Krishna that to see the guru as a human being is a hellish mentality, means to see that the guru's actions that reduce the guru to the level that there's nothing spiritual about the actions. The guru is connected with Krishna, and because the guru is connected with Krishna, therefore what the guru is speaking has a divine purpose. That has to be carefully understood. But
Good.
thank you. So, but that does not mean that, say, just as we human beings, we cannot get two places at the same time. Similarly, the spiritual master, we want to get two places, but we cannot get two places. The spiritual master is very dedicated. The spiritual master also has 24 hours a day only. They want to spend time with all the disciples, but they can't. He can't. So in that sense, the human limitation in terms of the selfishness that drives most human beings, that is not there in the spiritual master. But the human limitation that comes from having a body, that is there. So once that time there was no BJP, the Hindu Mahasabha, he met Prabhupada, Swamiji, you pronounce verses in a very Bengali way. You pronounce Sanskrit verses in a Bengali way. And Prabhupada said, what can I do? I am a Bengali. So now, Prabhupada had come from Bengal. So naturally he would have a Bengali accent. The Bengali way of singing or pronouncing. But what he was speaking was not Bengali wisdom. That was universal wisdom. So that point has to be considered that, that we need to not, if we idolize the spiritual master, quite often we go to the opposite side and go to the complete reject the authority itself. So humanize doesn't mean reduce to human being, but recognize that everybody has their, so I'll just be careful, you're going to make a picture of this, be careful of what I will say. Humanize does not mean that they have selfish human motivations. That is not what it means. What it means is that they have practical human limitations. So Prabhupada, the way he functioned, he never claimed he was omniscient. He would take decisions based on the information that he was given. If the information was wrong, then Prabhupada would take decisions based on that. And Prabhupada was given more correct information, he would take decisions based on that. So in that sense, we have to be careful. Thank you.
The power went off.
One question. Only one question.
Okay.
Vikarna comes when there is a talk about Vikarna also, that he also was against this act of dueling. But why was he not in that list?
Okay, see, Vikarna is not mentioned as a very significant character. He does oppose Duryodhana at that time, but afterwards there's no incident that he stands up to Duryodhana. And when Bhima kills Vikarna, at that time it is said that Bhima remembers that Vikarna had stood up to oppose what had happened to Draupadi. He remembers that, and it is according to some narratives of the Mahabharata, they said that when Bhima would kill the Kauravas, that there are some ways you offer respect to the dead person also. Like when Bhima falls, the Pandavas do a parikrama of Bhima's body. Hmm? So like that, Bhima does a parikrama of Vikarna's body. He's the only Kaurava for whom he does that. So there is some offering of respect, but there's no description that Vikarna opposes Duryodhan or in the peace mission. Only Dushasan stands up at that time.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Shri Krishna Bhagavan ki
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki
Jai.
Jai Gaur